And welcome to episode number 2 of the RCP Family Podcast. We're glad you've decided to listen. Today, I'm with my eldest child, Ev, and we're going to talk about quite a few things today. We're going to try to pack a lot into this episode. We're going to talk a little bit about politics and our lovely president. And then we're going to talk a little bit about gender and we'll share a little bit of personal things that are going on. And then if we get to it, we're going to talk about millennial burnout. So it's going to just be a really exciting episode. We're glad you all could be with us today. But first, so let me just have Ev, if you could introduce yourself. I think a lot of people don't know you, but even those who might know you, haven't heard from you in a while. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Ev. I am the eldest child. I am currently a senior at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm 22 years old. I'm environmental studies major with a chemistry minor, so that's fun. What do? I like baking a lot. I've gotten really into baking the past year or so. What do I do?
Tell us about the weather.
Oh, it's currently snowing a lot. And it's been snowing for the past 2 days on and off. There's a snow emergency out. It's currently 16 degrees. I just shoveled the back door way to get into my house, and there's a lot of freaking snow. I'll say that. And it's really cold outside, and that's fine because that's living here. And this is actually probably the most snow we've gotten in a couple years.
Well, it's funny. People ask me all the time when they find out that you're in school in Minnesota. They're like, "Well, what about the snow?" And I'm always like, "Well, you
get used to it."
Yeah, and you would always tell us, "I don't go outside."
I don't. It's worse now because I live off campus, so I do have to go outside more than I used to.
Right.
But I don't know. I leave the house in the morning and I come back whenever I'm done with stuff, and then I don't leave again.
Right. So, and then what are your plans for after school? I already kind of know, but so it's let's save that for the millennial time where people have to figure out what they're doing with their life. Let's talk about, so this morning I read a headline that said President Trump was at the National Prayer Breakfast, and he said that he was trying to do this litany of accomplishments that the faith community had participated in. And it said, giving the women the right to vote. And one of his, a classic misspeak was, and the abolishment of civil rights was something that, and I was like, are you kidding me?
That's not how
what? So, people are not surprised that we're not big Trump supporters or of anything that he does, says, and of his party. But you've been living in a college kind of community and culture. Do you remember what it was like when he was elected, that 2016? So you would have been a sophomore, right?
I was a sophomore, yeah. Yeah, it was terrifying. It was actually, it felt honestly like the beginning of apocalypse movies where it's like zooming in on the life before whatever happens. And it was me and maybe 4 of my friends sitting in our dorm room doing homework, watching the election, being like, oh, we're just gonna hang out. We'll watch the first one we get elected. It'll be great. We'll have some snack, and then as the night went on and the results started coming in and they started getting bad, we stopped doing homework because we couldn't focus, and we were just like, oh my God. And it was the next day, the next couple days, the next week or so it was a tragedy happened on campus. People's classes were, none of mine, because of course I was taking all math and science classes, and God forbid scientists have feelings, but a lot of my friends who had humanities classes, they were canceled, or one of my friends, her teacher came into the class and just started crying, and then they all went and sat in the field and cried together.
I'm using that as a soundbite later on.
I didn't get to do that. I had to go to class and we didn't talk about anything. So that was a little weird. But it was, everyone was the chapel is open for people who want to talk, counsel, everyone's talking about the counselors, it was
So did you notice
insane.
did you notice like what did the change look like on campus with the students pre-election and then post-election? I mean, what would you say would have been the changes on your campus in terms of how people acted or were treated, or just in general? Or anything that you would say, yeah, this was a definite change from this day to the next?
I would like to say things changed. I don't think they did really.
Hmm.
I have heard that right after the election, there were um, a number of Muslim students who dropped out or who like left
Hmm.
campus, who just like left. Um, so there was that, I guess. And there was like a couple days, like, and everybody talks about how weird of a time it was. But in terms of, I guess maybe just because it became part of our reality so suddenly and so unexpectedly. We were all shell shocked, I think. And so for a long time we were just going through what we would normally be doing because we just didn't like there was so much just like nobody knew what to do.
Right.
Nobody knew how to deal with this.
Has there been a change in just tone about when things happen now? I mean, is it an anti-Trump campus, or is it people trying to figure out how to work that out, or are there white supremacist groups that have now been given permission? And
Oh God, no.
what
I
has
would
that?
say we're still like this is still St. Paul. Like it's St. Paul. It's a city. Like we're a urban campus. Like we're, I would say, fairly anti-Trump as a general consensus. There are no like fringe white supremacy groups that have popped up. We have a Republican student org, but I don't think anybody goes to it.
They have a room, nobody goes.
I mean, like since the election, there have been 2 or 3 or 4 instances of people finding either swastikas or just like racist rhetoric written on. There's one on like a door. There's like somebody had something written on their dorm door, and then there's like something in the newsroom and just like
So
in
you
the
think that was
hallway.
students or people from the outside? Hard to say.
Nobody knows.
Right, because
Like
you've talked about McAllister having some issues around race before, and what it means for students of color to go to school there and all those kind of things. And it's been a great. I mean, overall, it's been a great institution. I'm not trying to bag on it, but like many of our liberal arts schools, they're not as diverse as they would want to be. Has the Trump election or this era impacted that?
I think if anything, it's just kind of reinforced, and like I think it was also very formative that this happened my third semester at McAllister, and so I think that is probably also when I became kind of not, I mean, I guess disenchanted with the idea of McAllister and what I thought it was going to be, and then what it and like adulthood and
Yeah.
institutions in general kind of ended up actually being. So I'd say if anything, it just kind of fostered this general, like it reinforced whatever mistrust you were already feeling in the system. It just made it be like, okay, no, this is actually like, this is real. Like, this is real. This is like another thing that proves that I feel like that I have this like insecurity here.
And to some extent that doesn't have to be McAllister, right? It's probably a lot of institutions that promised, or and again, who are striving to be something and then realizing, oh, wait a minute, no, we're actually not.
Yeah. And I mean, like the University of Minnesota, the Twin Cities, which is much bigger, like way bigger, a very different school for a lot of reasons, but they have a fairly active like young Republican organization or something. And there was a couple instances where they like painted a wall or something with like slogans that was like, I don't know, it was like build the wall, like build the wall. There's something about like, we don't care about pronouns and just kind of general, like, am I allowed to swear?
Yes. Well,
crappy stuff.
That's not swearing.
That's swearing in our family.
Did you get your candle for me?
Yes. It's an acronym that doesn't count.
Wait, you should see. Anyway, I'll show you your sister's. So sidebar for people that are listening to this, the father of the family bought candles for his children, and they all had swear words on them. And
Acronyms don't count as swear words.
one of them was, it's like even after a soccer game, you go down and you shake hands, and so one of my children got one that said, "Good game, good game, good game. F you, good game, good game, good game." Pretty funny.
That's funny.
Anyway,
That's funny.
back to Trump. So, hopeful things that have come out. We can, as I think about, as much as it's given permission for people to stop trying to not be racist and misogynist and all those things, it's also inspired some pretty amazing things. We think about the State of the Union, which I did not watch, but when Trump talks about the number of women in Congress, as if he could get credit for that. I'm like, dude, they're there because of you, yes, but not in the way
not in a good way.
Yeah, not in a good way. It's like,
not in the way that...
Yeah, it's like the bank robber that says, "Oh, look, the police are here. Isn't that exciting?" Right? So, so that's like this amazing kind of shift in Congress. Where have you seen on campus? With your colleagues, your peers, and things. Have you seen some hopeful things that have happened? I mean, what have there been anything that's generated some good stuff out of this kind of crap hole we're in?
I mean, in a weird way, I will say it. And like, obviously, I don't know everybody at McAllister. I'm sure like there are Trump supporters there, like somewhere hiding.
Right.
Which
they know better. They know better.
They do. They should know better.
Yeah.
They should know better. But I feel like if anything, in a weird way, it was like going through a traumatic experience together.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole campus was like, it was grieving.
Right. Shared trauma.
Shared trauma. And that is, it was most apparent, I would say, like right after the election, when it was just kind of like, oh, so this is the world we live in now. Thank you. That was great.
Right.
And maybe it's mellowed out a bit since then, as we've like been like, wow, this is actually happening. This is not a fever dream. This is not a nightmare. I would say, if anything, it has established maybe a common ground for the most part. Like, it drew a line in the sand, right, I guess.
Right. So do you think, as us old people talk about your generation, but do you get a sense that there is some hope for the future that's coming out of this, or is like, oh, we're screwed? It's not. I mean, as you talk with your friends and people on campus and see things, what's the vibe about the future?
I will say I have my moments of there's no hope. We're all just going to die. Like, also there's the whole, like, we might die from some like environmental apocalypse thing before any of this even matters. But I would say I do feel moments of hope, especially when I see they're like people who are politically active. Like, there's a ton of Mac students who are like doing work at the Capitol in St. Paul and like going to DC and doing work there. And even just people that I see who are maybe not like explicitly going into politics, but are like joining nonprofits and being like, I want to do this little bit of good.
Right. Well, that's good. I mean, I too, I feel, a lot of hope about what can be done. And I just have, I wasn't going to watch the State of the Union because I just want to throw the computer through the wall, and that's not good for any of us. And so, I mean, I found myself kind of being in these rhythms of depressiveness and just being, this is, and how do we take that back, right? How do you not give that kind of power to an administration and perspective that it wants to take our power from us? So, thank you. That's good. So let's move on. Let's talk about some other stuff. Gosh, what, a year and a half ago, you posted on Facebook 3 things. You said, taking a semester off from school, I'm bisexual, and I'm working at a shawarma restaurant or something like that.
I don't even know. I posted that in like a haze.
Right. So you posted those three things, and I was laughing because I think most of the people in your family were probably the most shocked by and worried about
The taking a semester
the
off
taking a
thing.
semester off. Right. Exactly. The other stuff was like whatever, fine. But so and since you've left home and you've you're growing into who you're becoming, you've had a journey around your gender and sexuality, and so let's talk about that a little bit. As well as we can. I'm trying. This is a very serious podcast. We are trying to model for the world good discussion. But really, we're as a family, I hope, have been supportive of this. It's hard, it's as we're shifting our own language. I have friends that are using they them pronouns now, and it's hard because you don't, they is not how it's not grammatically correct, but this is where we head and using Ev. So how would you describe that journey, where you are with stuff right now?
I would say it's been on. I don't know. I guess it all just kind of, for I guess both the gender and sexuality stuff, it was this like buildup that I wasn't even really conscious of, and then it all just kind of like, for whatever reason, coalesced, and I was suddenly be like, oh, this is a thing for kind of both like I don't know what, like sometime sophomore year, I just woke up and I was like, you know what? I think I'm actually like bisexual. And I like texted my friends. And I was like, I think this is true. And they were like, okay.
Yeah. So nobody was duh, or nobody was like, what? I mean, what were the variety of responses as you started to kind of verbalize this with your friends?
I mean, see, for a lot of people, I didn't even really have like a, hey, I guess like an explicit like coming out process. Right. It was just kind of like, I started talking about it, and I started like referencing it, and they were like, they like figured it out because it's college and like everybody's figuring it out.
Yeah.
And so like, it wasn't ever really a thing. Like it wasn't really a big deal. Like, I think I would say that the gender stuff has been maybe a little bit harder for me and harder to articulate for me than the like sexuality stuff, because I was just like, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's whatever.
So before we leave the sexuality stuff, so you posted that on Facebook. I assume that most of your family was very affirming and just or even just like whatever. Right. Okay. But you're taking a semester off from school. What? Yeah.
I think that was the biggest thing.
That was the biggest thing. But did any, and without calling out family members, do you think any of your family had a hard time with it? And I don't know of anybody. I'm wondering if you received anything outside of a kind of Facebook land, any negativity, or was there positivity? What was kind of the family piece around
there?
There
wasn't. I don't think there was much of anything really positive or negative. Like I have like one of our cousins who's older, who is also queer, like messaged me a little bit later and was just like kind of talking about it. I didn't get any particularly positive or negative responses. Like I think they were really focusing on the semester off thing.
And are we going to get free shawarma? Because I think that's probably also.
I mean, and also like, I think it's kind of new territory for our family. Like we don't really have anybody except that one cousin who is like, I guess not technically our cousin, but like,
right.
We don't really have anybody who's queer in our family. So that was part of my fear, is like,
we talk a big game, but really what happens when.
I mean, like, yeah, a little bit. Not, I mean,
Yeah.
You worry.
Yeah, I think I did see, like, I cried a little bit, as I think there were a few, like your Lola put something on there, and I think there were a few times, again, I love the fact that you're like, oh, did I do that? Like, when did I do that? But I remember watching it, wanting somewhat protective, right, of do we have any family members that are gonna, you know, act out in this public space,
Mhm.
or are they mostly going to be supportive, or at least, you know, worry about the thing that we are, you know, the school versus. So I'm glad. I mean, um, you know, you hear about so many stories, right, of people who, again, this wasn't necessarily the sit down, I need to tell you something talk, but
Right.
um, even so, you hear about so many young people who do come out to friends or family, and those don't go well. And, you know, we have friends, and you have, you know, people that, you know, that have probably experienced that.
Mhm.
So I'm glad. I'm good. I mean, I hope that we've been supportive as our internal family and all that. So
I mean, yeah, and like it's not. That's also the thing is I was never really like I expect you to do anything.
right, exactly. We
Like if
haven't.
anything, it was more of just a FYI
Right.
kind of thing
And
that I was
so,
like,
and
you
I
should.
will say that neither mom or I were surprised. Like not that we were waiting for you to, but it was also like, okay, yeah. I think mom has had more questions.
I know, yeah, that's true. That is true, but
Yeah.
that did not surprise me. I'm
No,
actually
not at all.
surprised she didn't ask more. Honestly,
We won't talk about mom too much because she's not here. She'll listen to
and
this
we're
later. Like, you guys
recording a
talked
pod.
about me? No, we didn't talk about you, honey. Because she's not going to listen to this podcast. She's too busy. She has like a real job and stuff. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. So let's talk about, though, the gender stuff, and talking about, you know, I think, you know, I serve on a board for an organization that does a lot around gender, and trying to look at non-binary relationships, and just, so how has that developed in your life and world, and all of that?
Hmm. Well, I will say that I will say has been maybe a slower journey than with sexuality, just because with like I was like sure I was like okay no for just like sexuality I was like no this is what it is,
Mhm.
whereas with gender it's been a lot more of a
Right, which is
kind of back and forth kind of
right, which is
thing.
kind of the idea, right? That gender is fluid,
Right,
right?
right, and like that I believe in that idea. I mean, I guess that's all. It's I'm trying to with that also I never really had I mean like I never really had like a coming out thing. It was just kind of I started talking about it with my friends and like referencing it, and like even with the pronouns I just kind of like forgot to explicitly tell my friends because it kind of happened during a time where half of my friends were abroad, and so I wasn't like direct wasn't having as much communication with them as I would have. So one of my friends like halfway through the summer or last semester or something texted me and we're like, wait, are you using they them pronouns? Is this like a thing now? And I was like, oh yeah. Oh crap, I forgot to tell you. That was my bad. That was totally my bad. So it was funny. I mean, like it's been really interesting kind of playing with the I get like there's so I could talk about this for a lot. Like I literally work at the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center. Like I talk about
Hmm.
this a lot.
Yep.
I'd say it's been really interesting playing, not playing, exploring my more masculine side, just because that isn't really anything that I had consciously thought about before.
Hmm.
Like, and like thinking back, I'm like, oh no, this kind of makes sense. Like in fifth
Hmm.
grade, I went through the phase where I would wear boys' clothes
Hmm.
and like wanted to be a skater girl and like did like all of that stuff. Um, I don't like I'm trying to think of exactly what to say. Like it's just been
Well, where
a
where
really
let me ask, where have you struggled most with this? I mean, and then where have you had the most kind of liberation? Are there been moments where either because of another person or a situation you've really felt like you couldn't express yourself differently, and other times where
mhm.
it's like, oh, this is, I'm totally can be who I am right now, and I'm kind of can talk about myself, and who, I mean,
Mhm.
what does that look like?
Hmm. I mean, I guess I would say because I have just a very relatively small group of close friends, they have been a place where I feel like I can really just not even have to be like not have to do an announcement, not have to like explicitly say anything, just being like, hey, this is kind of what's up with me right now. And they've been like great about that, I guess.
Well, it is it true that in some ways, and without making huge generalizations, right? But I think for your sisters who are in a school that have folks who identify as non-binary, there, like it's no big deal. I mean, there's almost kind of okay, that's fine. I mean, is that a fair statement around your kind of circle of friends that this isn't this huge deal, and so we're with you as you're going through all this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like it hasn't really been a huge deal for anybody.
Yeah.
Like the hardest thing has been like advocating for myself in terms of like what pronouns I use, and I'm still like not super great at correcting people. Just because I also have, I guess, a lot of hesitation and fear about that.
What is that? What do you where fearful of what?
I mean, at a very basic level, I would say like fear of rejection, or I guess at an even more basic level, like fear of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Which like is,
if you can't see us on the screen, we're both crying right now.
why would you do that you can't say that. I was trying to be cool.
Trying to hold together, man. Just another day.
I mean, like, and it's not, I've never really, I would say, been in a situation where I have had a huge reason to be fearful. I mean, fearful, I guess, specifically because of my like non-binary identity. Like,
but you have reason to be. I mean, it's certainly not a irrational thought to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, especially like as I am graduating and looking at professional things and kind of, I would say more with gender, less with sexuality, but like with both things, kind of being like, how do I approach this?
Right. And we raised you in an amazingly progressive bubble of San Francisco, and that we chose to do that. And St. Paul is in some ways very similar. And so stepping out into whatever's next, right? How do you, hold integrity about who you are, and but yet without putting yourself in those kind of situations that kind of hold you back unintentionally. I mean, I think this is what every parent worries about their child, no matter what, right? So thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's, I serve on the More Light Presbyterians board, and we have a couple of folks who identify with use pronouns they them, and I've on a couple of occasions I've had to apologize for misgendering, and and they've been so gracious with me and a couple other folks who have just having to shift our mindset and our language and almost training your mouth to put together words differently. But I think it's important for those of us, and it's not just because we have friends and family, but that as you know, there's so many people who are struggling in communities that are not as supportive, and it is a huge deal, and they're reaching these points of violence and taking their lives, and we never want to have that situation for you or for. See, I'm gonna start crying again.
Yeah, I will say like it's I mean, like, list of things you don't notice until you have to examine them. I mean, like, I mess up, like, call it like using they them pronouns for other people, which like there's a fair number of people,
right?
And like I don't know, like I always feel so disappointed, like even if it's just in my head, I like it's a huge
so
process of unlearning.
Yeah, and I think if we're able to do this well, we see that we give ourselves some room for that unlearning, and and I hope that you're able to kind of give people space to do that and learning. If they're really now, there are going to be people. We have people in our family who still refuse to use both my last names when on the checks, and your mother still has my last name. I mean, there will be people, and whether you could say that's cultural or intentional or passive aggressive, who knows what it's going to be. But having knowing that we all kind of have places in our worldview that are going to require some unlearning. I think that's good. So let me ask you, we'll probably close up here. For young people who are asking them questions of themselves right now, or having these conversations, and I will be so bold as to say that don't come out of a community of family and friends who don't give you pause when you're want to talk about or make these shifts or whatever, that I hope have been fairly supportive, and they're in situations that they know that that's not going to be the case. What do you say to them?
I guess, I mean, everybody talks about the just be true to yourself and everything else will fall in line, which I don't think is true, really. Like, be yourself, but also be safe. And I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer for if you're in a situation where you can't be yourself or be whatever you want to express as yourself. Like, try and find somebody that you can, even if it's just for a little bit, and try and get out of that situation, I guess.
Great. Thank you. Stop crying. Oh my gosh. For those of you that don't know our family, we are a crying family. It does not take a lot for to get me crying, and that's the running joke is, like, I cry over anytime there's any father-child relationship in any movie, song, whatever. I'm a weeping ball.
Yeah, it doesn't take me much either, so thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I cry at gum commercials.
Eczema and tears. That is my gift to you.
Yeah, that's also not fun.
All right. Well, I know you're loved by so many. Oh my. So those of you who are listening, we really appreciate you kind of getting to know us. So many of you, especially if you come out of my tradition of church and have followed along the growth of our family, it will be a shock to you that Ev is graduating from college, because some of you have known her for a very, very long time. In fact, see? In fact, at one point, didn't, like, you were in some Uber or something, and
oh my God.
some driver
thing ever. I got in an Uber with my friends first year, and I get in the car, and the Uber driver turns to me and says, "I know who you are," which is creepy. And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "I know your dad." And then it turned out he was like, he'd gone to a conference with you and was like a part-time pastor, part-time Uber driver.
Right.
Yeah, no, that was terrifying.
And awesome.
It was funny for my friends. They thought it was funny.
See, I would have thought it'd been
the whole thing.
I thought it'd been the other way around.
Hilarious.
I thought it'd be the other way around. You're like, "Oh, it's just my dad," and they would have been like, "What?" But
no, but now they know. Like, they think that having a podcast is like the funniest. Like,
it's.
I think one of my friends said, like, it was only a matter of time.
That is true. That is true. We're selling this off. Anybody out there that wants rights to the reality show, the RCP Family, give me a ring. Cameras in 4 different cities.
It's only a matter of time.
When your sister heads off to college, we'll have like 2 cities there, and then us. Oh, it'd be good. All right. Thank you, Ev, for being on the show. You'll join us sometime in the future. We'll maybe do a sibling cast. But for those of you that are tuning in, again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.